I walked into the kitchen that Tuesday morning, and the silence hit me before anything else did. My phone had been quiet for 3 days, unusual for a woman with 4 children, 9 grandchildren, and what I thought was a close-knit family. The coffee maker gurgled its familiar song as I prepared my second cup, moving slowly through the routine I perfected over 53 years of mornings. Through the kitchen window, I could see Mrs. Chun watering her garden next door, and I envied her for a moment. The simplicity of her life, the way she seemed unbothered by everything except those roses. My phone buzzed. Finally. But it wasn't one of my children. It was a text from my daughter-in-law, Jennifer, and even before I read the full message, something in my stomach twisted. "Hi Alice. Just wanted to give you a heads up that the graduation party is going to be pretty casual this year. We're keeping it small, just immediate family and close friends. Hope you understand." I read it 3 times, each time searching for hidden meaning, for some explanation that would make sense. My hand suddenly felt too warm holding the phone. I sat down at the kitchen table, the one my late husband David had refinished himself 30 years ago, and I tried to process what I was reading. They were having a graduation party for my grandson Marcus. My grandson. The boy I'd held 24 hours after he was born when my daughter Sarah couldn't stop shaking from the epidural wearing off. The boy I'd taught to tie his shoes, driven to soccer practice every single Thursday for 7 years, helped with his high school applications, and yes, the boy I had written a check for $5,000 to help him with his first semester of college. And I wasn't invited. Not in those words, of course. The message was softer than that, wrapped in reasonable explanations and gentle language. But the meaning was unmistakable. "Alice, you don't belong at this celebration. Alice, you're not part of our immediate family. Alice, you're something else now. Something separate. Something that can be politely excluded." I set my phone down on the table and looked at my hands. They were shaking. These hands had wiped away tears from all 4 of my children when they were small. These hands had made 10,000 meals for this family. These hands had held David when he died. And they'd held each of my children while they grieved him too. And now these hands were too much. These hands were the hands of a woman who didn't belong. The coffee had gone cold. I poured it down the sink, watching the dark liquid swirl away, disappearing into nothing. And I made a decision. A quiet one, sitting alone in that kitchen, but a decision nonetheless. I wasn't going to beg for inclusion. I wasn't going to call and cry or question them about why I'd been excluded. I wasn't going to humble myself or explain my value or remind them of everything I'd done. Instead, I was going to show them who I was without their permission to exist in their lives. I didn't know it yet, but that quiet moment in the kitchen, holding a cold cup of coffee, was the moment everything changed. To understand how I got to that morning, you need to understand who I've been my entire life. I was born in 1968, the middle child of 5 in a working-class family in Cleveland. My father was a steelworker, and my mother raised us with this fierce, uncompromising love. She taught me that the most important job any woman could have was taking care of her family. Not as a burden but as a calling. She made it clear that motherhood, wifehood, and later grandmotherhood were the roles that mattered most. I believed her with my whole heart. I met David in college, Ohio State, where I was studying education because it seemed like a natural extension of my maternal instincts. He was studying engineering, and he was kind in a way that felt rare even then. Patient. Interested in what I thought. When he asked me to marry him on a bench overlooking the Olentangy River, I said yes before he could even finish the question. We got married in 1989 when I was 21. I was pregnant with my first child, Sarah, by 1990. We bought our first house, a small colonial in the suburbs, and I became exactly what my mother had prepared me to be. A devoted wife and mother. I had Sarah, then Michael 2 years later, then Jennifer 4 years after that, and finally Christopher when I was 32. For children across 13 years. For chances to do it right, to raise them properly, to make sure they knew they were loved beyond measure. And I poured every ounce of myself into that work. I never went back to teaching after Sarah was born. David made decent money as an engineer, not quite enough that I could stay home without some real sacrifices, but we managed. I clipped coupons. I made most of our clothes. I grew vegetables in the backyard. I became the person who made holidays happen. Not just Christmas and Thanksgiving, but Valentine's Day pancakes shaped like hearts, Easter egg hunts in the yard, birthday celebrations that lasted entire weekends. David and I had this partnership where he was the provider and I was the maker of home. It felt right to both of us. I never resented it. I loved it genuinely. I loved the routine of it, the purpose of it, the way my children needed me to be exactly who I was. My children grew up understanding that family was everything. We had dinner together almost every night. We had game nights on Fridays. We took annual vacations to visit David's parents in Michigan. We volunteered together at the local food bank every Thanksgiving. We were that family, the one where the kids brought home their friends and those friends immediately felt comfortable because my home was their home. When Sarah was in high school, she went through a rebellious phase. Nothing serious, some experimentation with smoking, some lying about where she was on weekend nights. But I caught her naturally, and instead of punishing her harshly, David and I sat her down, and I told her that she could trust me. That no matter what she did, if she needed help, I would be there. I meant it. And she believed me. By senior year, she was back on track. And later she would tell me that conversation was the thing that kept her from making more serious mistakes. Michael was the sensitive one. He struggled with anxiety, and when he was 11 we discovered he was dealing with panic attacks. Instead of sending him to a therapist right away, this was the late 90s and there was still stigma, I learned everything I could about anxiety. I created safety plans with him. I went to sleepaway camp when he went to summer camp because he was too nervous to go alone. I sat with him through every attack, and I learned to recognize the signs to help him before it got bad. By high school, he'd mostly outgrown it, and he's told me many times that my presence made the difference. Jennifer was the easy one, at least on the surface. She was social and bright and seemed like she had everything figured out. But I knew her well enough to understand that underneath was a deep need to please people, to be perfect, to never let anyone down. I tried to teach her that it was okay to disappoint people sometimes, that her worth wasn't tied to her productivity or her likability. She never quite believed me, but I kept trying. And Christopher was my baby. My last chance to get it right. He was born when I was older, perhaps a bit wiser, and I tried not to repeat the mistakes I'd made with the others. I gave him more space. I was less anxious about who he'd become. We were close in a different way. We laughed easily together. And there was less tension than there'd sometimes been with the others during their rebellious years. David was present through all of it. He was the father who came to soccer games and school plays. He was the one who taught all 4 kids to ride bikes. He made terrible dad jokes that we all groaned at but secretly loved. We had a good marriage, not perfect but solid. Real. We fought sometimes, but we always came back to each other. He knew me. He saw me. He told me regularly that I was doing an incredible job, that our children were lucky to have me. I believed that. For decades I believed that deeply and completely. All 4 of my children grew up and built their own lives. Sarah became a lawyer. Michael became an accountant. Jennifer went into marketing. Christopher became a doctor. They all married people who seemed kind and appropriate. They had children. They got mortgages and promotions and became the successful version of themselves. And throughout all of it, I remained the constant. The organizer of family dinners. The keeper of everyone's schedules. The one who called and texted and checked in. The one who showed up. When David had his heart attack, he was 63, I was 59, I was the one who was there. I was the one who held his hand in the emergency room. I was the one who learned how to give him his medications and manage his recovery. I was the one who sat in his hospital room every single day for 2 weeks. And when he didn't survive the second attack 6 months later, I was the one who held our family together through the grief. My children were devastated, but I remember being almost proud of how I handled it. I didn't fall apart. I organized the funeral. I managed the logistics. I answered condolence calls and organized the reception and made sure everyone was fed and cared for. I was strong for them. I was the foundation. After David died, my role shifted but didn't diminish. If anything, it deepened. I became the repository of family history. I had all the old photo albums, all the home videos, all the memories of our life together. I was the one who maintained the connections between the scattered family members. When Sarah had a conflict with Michael, it was me who helped mediate. When Jennifer struggled with postpartum depression after her second child, it was me who moved in for 3 months and held the baby and made sure she ate and took her medication. My grandchildren started arriving when I was in my early 50s. And for me it felt like a second chance. I got to be the grandmother who baked cookies from scratch, and taught them to make pie crust, and listened to them describe their dreams without trying to fix anything. Marcus, Sarah's oldest, had always been special to me. He was quiet and thoughtful like Michael. He needed someone to see him, to understand that his quietness wasn't shyness but depth. I'd spent hours with him over the years just listening, just being present. I never kept score. That was the thing. I never thought, I did this for you so you owe me. I never approached any of it transactionally. I did these things because I loved them, because they were my family, because that's what I understood my role to be in this world, to be the safe place, the constant, the one who showed up no matter what. So when that text came through from Jennifer, when I read those careful words about keeping it small and immediate family only, I didn't just feel excluded. I felt erased. Like all of that 53 years of showing up, of being the foundation, of pouring myself out, didn't actually count for anything. Like maybe I'd misunderstood my entire role. But sitting there in my kitchen, I understood something else too. I realized that I'd built my entire identity around being needed, around being the solution to other people's problems, around my family's willingness to accept my help and my presence. And in doing that, I'd made myself vulnerable to exactly this moment, where someone could simply decide I didn't belong, and I would be powerless to argue because I'd never built anything else. For the first time in my life, I understood that I needed to become someone who didn't require their permission to exist. The days after that text were strange. I didn't call Sarah or Jennifer to ask for an explanation. I didn't text Michael or Christopher to see if they knew. Instead, I did something I'd rarely done in my adult life. I did nothing for anyone but myself. On Wednesday, I called a woman named Patricia who I'd met at the grocery store a few months earlier. We'd had a conversation about gardening, and she'd mentioned she was starting a book club. I thought at the time that it sounded interesting, but I had too much going on. This time I asked for her number. I'd love to join, I heard myself say. On Thursday, I went to a pottery class at the community center. I'd always wanted to try it. My hands shook as I sat down at the wheel, but something about it felt right. The mud, the uncertainty, the way you had to be present and focused or the whole thing would collapse. On Friday, I did something radical. I looked at my refrigerator, which was covered in photographs of my grandchildren and calendars noting all their various events. For years, I'd kept a detailed calendar so I'd never miss anything. A soccer game, a school recital, a birthday party. I'd structured my entire life around their availability. I took down half the photographs. Just took them down. I didn't throw them away, I put them in a box. And I created space on my refrigerator for something else. I printed out some travel websites and pinned them up instead. Places I'd always wanted to go. Sounds small, but it felt revolutionary. By Monday, Sarah called. Finally. "Hi, Mom," she said, and I could hear something uncertain in her voice. Like she was testing the temperature of the water before diving in. "How are you?" "I'm good," I said. And I meant it. I took a pottery class this week. I was terrible at it, but I'm going back next week. There was a pause. "That's nice. Hey, I wanted to talk to you about Marcus's party. I was waiting for this. I had prepared for this. But what I'd prepared for was not what I intended to do. I'd prepared apologies, explanations, ways to make them feel better about excluding me. But that wasn't going to happen. "Sarah, I got Jennifer's message," I said calmly. "And I'm not going to be at the party." "What?" "Mom, we want you to be there. It's just going to be small. You made it clear I wasn't invited. And that's okay. I respect that. I'm not going to force myself into a space where I'm not wanted." "Mom, that's not what." "Sweetheart, I love you. But I'm learning that I've spent a lot of years taking up space in your lives, based on what I thought I was supposed to be for you. And I think it's time I stopped doing that. So I'm not going to beg for inclusion. I'm not going to explain why I should be there. That's your decision to make. But if you decide I'm not part of this moment with Marcus, then I'm okay with that now." The words came out steadier than I expected. And I meant every single one. She didn't know what to say. She tried several times backtracking, explaining that they really did want me there, that it was just about space, but I noticed she wasn't actually rescinding the exclusion. She was just trying to make me feel better about it. "That's okay," I repeated. "I'm going to focus on my own things now." When I hung up, my heart was racing. But I wasn't afraid. I was angry. I was hurt, but underneath all of that I was something I'd never been before. I was free. The weeks leading up to Marcus's graduation party were the beginning of everything changing. And as it happened, they were also when I started to discover the full scope of what had been happening beneath the surface of our family for years. My daughter Jennifer called me a few days after my conversation with Sarah. She wanted to meet for lunch. I almost said no. I was protecting myself now. I told myself, learning not to be the one who always showed up. But something made me accept. We met at a little cafe near downtown, the kind of place I'd never suggested before because I was usually too busy organizing everyone else's schedules. Jennifer arrived late, she always did, and she looked exhausted. "Hi, Mom," she said, and I could see that she'd been crying. We ordered our food, and for a while we just made small talk. How the kids were doing, how work was going, the usual surface-level exchanges. But then Jennifer's face crumpled a little. "I need to tell you something," she said. "About the party." I waited. I'd learned that sometimes waiting was more powerful than filling silences. "It wasn't my idea," she said quietly. "The whole excluding you thing. It was Michael and Christopher's idea mostly. Michael's idea, actually. He said that you were always inserting yourself into everything, and that it was time we all learned to have our own family events without you orchestrating them. And he said..." She paused, looking embarrassed. "He said it was emotionally draining to always have you there. Always needing to be in the center of things." I felt like something inside me had cracked. "What did Sarah say?" I asked. "She objected at first. But then Michael explained that we all needed boundaries with you. That you'd made it so that you were always the central figure, and it was time we became independent from that. That it was unhealthy for us to rely on you showing up to make things feel real." The words hit me like physical blows. Emotionally draining. Needing to be in the center. I thought about all those years of showing up, and I realized that I'd never once asked if my presence was actually welcome. I just assumed that because they were my children they would want me there. "I don't agree with him," Jennifer said quickly. "I think he's wrong. But I also know that I've kind of become dependent on you, Mom. Like, I can't make a major decision without consulting you first. And maybe they have a point that that's not healthy." "Jennifer," I said carefully, "there's a difference between being emotionally dependent and being a mother. I love you. I'm here for you. That shouldn't be something you feel guilty about." "I know. But I also think maybe we all took it for granted. Like, you were always there so we never had to figure things out on our own. And now we're adults with our own families, and I think some of my siblings feel like it's time you step back and let us live our lives." I understood what she was saying, and on some level I could see how it might feel that way to them. But what I also understood was that they were rewriting the narrative. They were taking my love and my presence and transforming it into something pathological, something that needed to be cured by my exclusion. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said. "But I want you to know something. I'm making some changes in my life. I've started taking classes. I've joined a book club. I'm building things for myself, not just for this family. And I think that's good. But that doesn't mean I'm going to stop loving you or being here for you if you need me." Jennifer reached across the table and touched my hand. "I don't think anyone wants to stop you from loving us. I just think maybe you could love us from a bit of a distance." I looked at my daughter, this successful, beautiful woman I'd helped raise, and I realized that no matter what I said, she'd already made up her mind. They all had. My presence had been reframed from loving to controlling. My involvement had been reframed from supportive to suffocating. And the only way they would see me differently was if I actually became someone different. So I did. I started small. I didn't call anyone for a week. Just 1 week. In the 40 years I'd been a mother, I don't think I'd ever gone that long without initiating contact with at least one of my children. The silence was terrifying at first, and then it became peaceful. I used that week to deep clean my house. Not for anyone else but for myself. I organized my closet and got rid of clothes I'd been wearing for years because they were practical, not because I liked them. I bought myself new things. Colorful things. Soft things. Things I wanted to wear. I also did something that was harder. I looked at my finances. David had left me well. Not wealthy but comfortable. I had my house paid off. I had a pension from when he worked. I had some investments that had grown over the years. I wasn't going to struggle, but I was also not being strategic about my money. Most of it was sitting in a savings account earning nothing. I called a financial advisor, something I'd never done before, always thinking that was David's job or later Michael's job since he was an accountant. I spent 3 hours with her learning about my options, about how I could make my money work for me. You have way more options than you think, she told me. You could travel. You could invest in business ventures. You could help causes you care about. You have real freedom here. Freedom. The word had never quite meant that before. When my week of silence ended, I didn't go rushing back into my old patterns. Instead, I was strategic. Called Sarah back. I want to talk about the party situation, I said. I want to know exactly what happened. Sarah, who was clearly uncomfortable, explained that Michael had made the argument that Jennifer had already told me about, that I was controlling, that I inserted myself into everything, that they needed to learn to have their own family events. Has Michael felt this way for a long time? I asked. I think so. He mentioned it to us a few times over the past year or so. He said he felt like he couldn't breathe without you hovering. Hovering. That was a new one. Did you agree with him? Not exactly. But I've never really told you no before, Mom. I don't know how. It felt easier to just go along with what Michael suggested. That was the real issue, I realized. I'd created children who couldn't say no to me, and now they were trying to establish independence by pushing me away entirely. They weren't angry at me. They were angry at themselves for never having learned to set boundaries. Sarah, I want you to do something for me, I said. I want you to call Michael and tell him that you want me at the party. Don't ask him. Tell him. You're an adult. You make your own decisions. And you've decided you want your mother at your son's graduation celebration. Mom, I can't. Yes, you can. This is the moment. Either you establish your independence by learning to set healthy boundaries with your family members while keeping the people you love close, or you establish it by pushing them away entirely. Choose the first one. I hung up after that, and I didn't know if she would actually do it. But I knew that I couldn't keep enabling their avoidance of responsibility. I called my friend Patricia from the book club and asked if she wanted to help me plan a trip. Where do you want to go? She asked, and I realized I had no idea. I'd been to see my children and their children. I'd been to visit David's parents. I'd been to a few family vacations. But I'd never traveled anywhere just because I wanted to. Greece, I said, surprising myself. I want to go to Greece. And then because I was on a roll and couldn't stop myself, I asked her if she wanted to go with me. Just the two of us. 2 women in our 50s taking a trip together. Yes, she said immediately. Absolutely yes. I booked the trip that day. 10 days in October. We would visit Athens and Crete and Santorini. It would cost me about $8,000 total. I didn't ask anyone's permission. I didn't check if it was okay. I just did it. I told my children about the trip at our next family dinner. Yes, I still had family dinners. I wasn't burning bridges, I was just building a healthier relationship to them. When I mentioned it casually while passing the salad, I watched for their reactions. Michael looked genuinely shocked. You're going to Greece? For 10 days. Yes, I said. There's so much of the world I've never seen. And I'm at a point in my life where I can do that now. Who are you going with? Christopher asked. A friend. Patricia. You don't know her. We met recently. I could see them processing this. This wasn't the mother who had organized her entire life around them. This was someone new. Someone with her own plans, her own friendships, her own desires. It made them uncomfortable. I could see it written across their faces. And I realized that my change was more of a threat to them than my devotion had been. Because my devotion had given them a role. It had made them the center of the universe. And now that role was being taken away. But something else was happening too. In a subtle way, they seemed to be respecting me more. After that dinner, Christopher asked me about Greece. Actually asked me questions about what I wanted to see, what had made me decide to go. For the first time in years, I wasn't the person extracting information from him. He was extracting information from me. 2 weeks before Marcus's party, I got a text from my daughter-in-law Jennifer. Not a message about the party, but an invitation to lunch. Just the two of us. We met at a different cafe, and Jennifer looked nervous. I wanted to apologize, she said immediately. About the party situation. And about what Michael said about you. What did he say about me? I asked, genuinely curious. He said that you were controlling and emotionally manipulative. That you made the rest of us feel guilty for not giving you enough attention or gratitude. That you structured everything around getting validation from taking care of us. I sat with that for a moment, and then I asked her a question. Do you believe that? No, she said firmly. I don't. But I think Michael does, and I think he convinced everyone else that it was true. And I just realized that by going along with it, I was abandoning you based on someone else's narrative about who you are. Why did he come up with this narrative? I asked. Do you think he's mad at me about something specific? Jennifer took a long time answering. I think Michael has always felt like you loved him differently than you loved the others. That you were hovering over him because of his anxiety, and it made him feel like he was broken. And I think now that he's an adult and he doesn't struggle with anxiety anymore, he's angry that you're still treating him like he does. That landed hard. I had spent years trying to support Michael through his anxiety, to normalize it, to show him he wasn't broken. And somewhere along the way he had internalized it differently. He thought I saw him as broken. My attempts to help had somehow become, in his mind, evidence that I didn't believe in him. Jennifer, I want you to do me a favor, I said. I want you to tell Michael that I'm not coming to the party. I want you to tell him that I've made a decision, and that decision is based on what he said. Mom, no. Wait. Let me finish. Tell him that I've heard his concerns, and I want him to know that I respect them. But also tell him that I've realized I've spent my whole life trying to earn other people's love by taking care of them. And I'm not going to do that anymore. Not for anyone. Tell him that I'm becoming someone who is loved for who she is, not for what she does. And when he's ready to know that person, when he's ready to accept that I can be his mother and still be my own person, then he can reach out to me. That sounds like an ultimatum, Jennifer said quietly. Maybe it is. But it's not one I'm giving him as a punishment. I'm giving it to him as a gift. Because the only way he's going to be able to have a real relationship with me is if he sees me as a whole person, not as a function he's assigned me. I didn't attend Marcus's graduation party. I got a text that day from my grandson Marcus himself. A simple message that said, "Miss you, Grandma." And I responded with love and pride in what he'd accomplished, but I didn't show up. Instead, I showed up for myself. I hosted a small gathering in my home for some of the people I'd met in my pottery class and book club. We ate food I made and we talked about books and art and life. And for the first time in years, I wasn't the manager of the gathering. I wasn't the one making sure everyone was comfortable or had enough to eat. I was just a person among people, participating in life together. But that was really just the beginning of what happened next. Because my absence at that party created a vacuum. And into that vacuum rushed the reality of what my family had lost. Michael called me 3 days after the party. "Hi, Mom," he said, and I could hear something in his voice I'd never heard before. He sounded small. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, keeping my own voice neutral. "I want to talk about what you said to Jennifer. About how you're not going to keep taking care of us." "Okay," I said. "I'm listening. I think I owe you an apology. For what I said about you being controlling. I was wrong. I didn't leap in to make him feel better. I let him sit with that discomfort. I've been thinking a lot about why I said those things," he continued. "And I think I was angry at you for something that wasn't really your fault. I was angry that you'd always been there for me during my anxiety, and that made me feel like maybe I was always going to be the broken kid. But that's not on you. That's on me. That's me not being able to separate your support from my identity. That's a very mature realization," I said. "I don't want you to not be my mother. I think I needed to not need you so much. And I thought if I pushed you away, I would become independent. But all I've done is create distance and hurt someone I love. Michael, I'm not asking you to need me. I'm asking you to respect me. To see me as someone who is complex enough to have her own life while still being your mother. Can you do that?" "Yes," he said. "I think I can." The day I got back from Greece, I looked completely different. It wasn't just that I had a tan. It was that something inside me had transformed. In Greece, I had walked through ancient ruins and sat in cafes and had conversations with strangers about art and philosophy. I had laughed until my sides hurt. I had cried when I saw the sunset over the Aegean Sea. I had been fully, completely present in my own life. Sarah picked me up from the airport, and the first thing she said was, "You look happy." "I am happy," I said. "Tell me everything," she said, and she meant it. She actually wanted to hear about my trip, my experience, my life. Not as a way to insert herself into it, but as a genuine desire to know who I'd become. Over the following months, things shifted in ways I never expected. Michael made a real effort to rebuild our relationship. Not the old one where I was managing his emotions, but a new one where we could actually talk to each other as adults. He opened up about his anxiety, how it had reshaped his whole worldview, and how he was working to understand that my presence in his life had been a choice I made for love, not a requirement I made for validation. Christopher started asking me for advice, but different advice than before. Instead of coming to me with problems he wanted me to solve, he came to me asking how I would handle something. And when I answered, he took it as guidance, not gospel. We had actual conversations. Jennifer stopped deferring to my judgment so automatically. Sometimes she disagreed with me, and I had to watch her do things her own way, even when I thought she might fail. And sometimes she did fail. And she dealt with it. And she grew. And I stood back and let her grow. Sarah became something like a real friend. We still had our relationship as mother and daughter, but we developed something beyond that. We would have wine on Friday nights and talk about our lives, our fears, our dreams. She would ask me questions about David, about my marriage, about how I'd managed to stay with one person for 35 years. And I would answer, not as someone dispensing wisdom, but as someone sharing her truth. Marcus called me the week after he got his diploma in the mail. "I wanted you to know first," he said. "I got accepted to the master's program. The one I was nervous about applying to." "That's wonderful," I said. "I wanted to thank you, actually, for not coming to the party." "What? Why would you thank me for that?" "Because it made me realize that I needed to start making my own choices about who I wanted around me, instead of just accepting whatever was organized for me. And the first thing I did was tell my parents that I wanted you at my graduation ceremony, which is still happening in a month. And I wanted you to know that my choice is for you to be there. Because you matter to me. And I wanted to celebrate with you, not just be celebrated by you." I cried after that phone call. Happy tears. The kind of tears you cry when you realize that the painful moment was actually the doorway to something better. A month before my birthday, which was coming up in about 9 months from the time of the party, my children approached me together. All 4 of them, coordinating in a way they hadn't done since their father died. "We want to talk about your birthday," Sarah said. My stomach tensed. I wasn't going to be excluded again. I was stronger now, but the old wounds could still be tender. "We want to do something really special," Michael said, "to make up for how we treated you about the party." "You don't need to make anything up," I said carefully. "Yes, we do," Christopher said. "But more importantly, we just want to celebrate you. Not because of what you do for us, but just because you're you." "We were thinking," Jennifer said, "a weekend trip. All of us. We'll hire someone to stay with the grandkids. We'll go somewhere you want to go. And we'll spend the time actually getting to know who you are now." I felt something shift inside me. Not because they were being nice to me, but because they were finally seeing me. "I'd like that," I said. "But I want you to know that I'm not doing things for you anymore expecting something in return. If you do this, I'm going to enjoy it because I love spending time with you. Not because I need you to validate my existence." "We know," Sarah said. "That's the whole point. We finally see who you are, and we want to be part of your life, not the other way around. And here's the thing that nobody tells you about reclaiming your life from the role you've been playing your entire adulthood. It's not about punishing the people who were complicit in your erasure. It's about becoming someone so interesting, so vital, so completely present in your own existence, that they can't help but want to be part of it. I didn't win my family back by becoming a martyr or by being noble or by suffering beautifully and quietly. I won them back by refusing to participate in my own erasure. By saying, no, I matter too. I matter to myself, and if I matter to you, then you need to see me as a full person, not just as a function." "Do you know what happened at Marcus's graduation ceremony?" All of my children stood up during the family recognition portion, and they made a point of recognizing me. Not as a grandmother, not as a mother, but as Alice, the woman who had the courage to step back and become herself. In that moment, I understood something crucial. The relationships we're most afraid to transform are often the ones that most desperately need transforming. My life didn't get easier when I stepped back from being everything to everyone. In some ways, it got harder. I had to be alone with myself. I had to figure out who I was when I wasn't cooking someone's favorite meal or managing someone's emotions. I had to build a life that wasn't dependent on other people's appreciation of me. But my life got so much richer. I did go to Greece. It was the most beautiful trip of my life. I also joined a pottery studio cooperative where I now take classes 3 times a week. My work is actually getting pretty good. There's something about working with your hands, creating something from nothing that feels like proof that you're alive. I also got involved with a local nonprofit that helps women in transitional housing learn job skills. And I'm doing this because it matters to me, not because I'm expected to do it. When I teach these women about confidence in interviews or how to communicate their worth in the workplace, I'm teaching them what I've had to learn about myself. Patricia and I have become genuine friends. We travel together. We've been planning our next trip for months, Portugal and Spain. We talk about books and life, and what it means to have a sense of purpose that isn't tied to other people's needs. And my family, we're closer now than we've been in years, because the closeness is real. It's not based on obligation or guilt or the complex dance of unmet needs pretending to be love. When my grandchildren visit now, I enjoy them fully. But I also enjoy my own life when they're not here. I paint. I read. I take myself on dates. I've started learning Spanish. I joined a walking club. I volunteer at the library. And I really think, that my children are beginning to understand what took me so long to figure out. That the most generous gift a mother can give her children is to show them that she has a life that matters beyond them. Because that's what gives them permission to do the same. The party where I wasn't invited was the worst day of my life. And it was also the best day of my life. Because it was the day I finally understood that I wasn't invited anywhere I needed to go unless I invited myself first. I am Alice. I am a mother. I am a grandmother. I am also a woman who travels to Greece and takes pottery classes and reads books at cafes and laughs with friends who see me for exactly who I am. And that is everything.